Well, joining us now is Patrice Lee Onwuka. She's the director of the Center for Economic Opportunity at the Independent Women's Forum. And also joining us, Thomas Savidge, research fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research. Good morning to you both.
Good morning. Good to see you.
So, Patrice, we'll start with you. Your reaction to that analysis of the economy from the New York Times.
Well, the New York Times is trying to fan the flames of fear in the consumer. I think there's been a mix of good news and some troubling news. Not surprisingly, the labor force, we're seeing the downward revisions that are pretty significant. But when we look at the inflation rate in the report from last week, there are lots of areas of optimism. You know, gas, for example, fell over 8%. We're seeing annualized inflation under the Trump administration less than 2%, which is, below the Fed's target. Even a lot of back-to-school items that, we talk to at Independent Women's, we talk to women, and a lot of back-to-school items, we're seeing not just lower inflation, but we're actually seeing price drops, which is encouraging for parents who are trying to, just get their kids to back to school without having to break the budget.
So, Thomas, what's your take on this New York Times economic hoax?
Well, Patrice, I think you hit the nail on the head there, where the news is mixed at best, and I think that mixture of good and bad is really what's causing a lot of uncertainty and some people to be concerned. Not only are we seeing, you're seeing those mixed inflation reports. The consumer price index did a little bit better than expected, but that producer price index, the prices that businesses receive from the suppliers for the stuff they're going to buy that ends up on the shelves, that went up. And that is in part due to the tariffs. And whether or not that bleeds into consumer prices is yet to be seen. But, even if businesses eat those costs, the cost increase might not show up on a price tag. It might show up in the form of a smaller inventory, smaller business hours, or as many employers have already reflected, a hesitancy to hire. So you might end up with shorter staff even during those peak hours. I haven't gone through it yet with my kids, but I remember being younger and going to those office supply stores, the back to school night. And, the lines were out the door. Imagine that, but now the staff is a bit shorter as well. But, of course, too, you have Chairman Powell's Jackson Hole speech coming up this week. And really, it speaks to kind of a problem at the Fed everywhere, for the Fed's history, where they have a decent amount of discretion and the world hangs on every single word that somebody says in a speech. And they're trying to figure out what that means for the Fed going forward. If instead the Fed focused on monetary stability, one clear, concise rule, they'd get more predictability, and with more predictability, you'd get a lot more stability in markets than we have right now.
Yeah.
Patrice, here's the situation, right? I hear these producers, based upon the index, crying about a slight bump in the prices that they pay for goods. And I understand those business concerns, especially for small businesses. However, it's a balance. What you and Thomas are talking about, it's a balance. And the balance I'm seeing that really is not being touted are the huge tax breaks coming from the big, beautiful bill. With regard to what? 100% depreciation and other tax benefits that offset and helps not only your operating cash and protecting your earnings as you go further down the net income statement, but bolsters earnings per share. So I don't see it as a big impact on earnings. How do you see it?
Well, I think you're right. When we look at the NFIB Small Business Optimism Index, it rose. Small business owners have said that tariffs and inflation is actually not their top concern. It's number one, hiring, and number two, taxes. And they're very pleased that now they have certainty around the tax, what's happening with taxes going forward. You talked about bonus depreciation. I talked to small business owners who also appreciate the 20% deduction for small businesses. These are real savings that that these small businesses and large businesses as well, they can invest. That means buying a new truck, hiring a new driver to buy that truck, expanding a warehouse, being able to launch a new part of your pastry empire. I've profiled a small Michigan business, pastry business, where they've expanded because of the 2017 tax cuts, and they were clamoring for the One Big Beautiful Bill. So I think we'll start to see a lot of the economic impacts from businesses reinvesting these savings in the future and buying now in anticipation of a much stronger tax position than they had the One Big Beautiful Bill not passed.
Wow, expanding pastry business. That means they're in the dough. No pun intended. Patrice Lee Onwuka and Thomas Savidge, thank you so much for joining First Edition.
Thank you.
Thank you.